for Finished Pencil Portrait of a Child. I'm referring from the same photos that I used for the child's proportions last week. So it would be interesting for you to contrast the difference between the 30-minute sketch and what was perhaps a 10-hour portrait drawing. So this is sped up, obviously, as are all the other ones, and I will put slight more emphasis this time on aspects like hair and how you hold your pencil, and a little bit on skin and then on fabric as well. So I've drawn in the horizontal lines as I have previously in the other drawings. And these are to figure out where the placement of the facial features are. And at this stage, for the line drawing, you're really putting down the bones of the image. You're putting down the structure of the face, and so you will need to use the eraser a lot, like I just have. The face looked too wide as I put down the facial features. So it can be hard to get the scale, so readjust things to fit as well. Of course, you're using your pencil to get angles and to measure where possible. So you're figuring out the relationship of the eyes to the nose through angles to see if they're sitting in the right position. Angle your pencil against your nose and your mouth and your ears. This face is slightly tilted, so you'll see that again all the horizontal lines are tilted, and we're getting that sort of below view of the face, slight below view. So the maybe the typical proportions don't correspond completely accurately because it's not a full straight on view. So I'm just finishing off the line drawing in some of the hair shapes there, and just defining some facial features a bit more, trying to get the right shape. Putting in some of the lines of the hair just to get an idea of the way the hair is flowing. I'm using a 2H pencil for the most part. I might be using so I'm going into use a darker pencil here now. So I outline the eye in a 2H, and the details of the eye, including the pupil, the areas where the light will sit, and then go in with a darker pencil. So I'm using a combination of 2B, 4B, 6B. 6B for the darkest, obviously, and that will be for the pupil, the outer rim of the iris, and the lightest bit, which I keep white pretty much, is where the light is reflected in the eye. There is another light area in the iris which needs a slight tone on it. So you could use your 2H to give a slight little tone on it, but it sits out lighter than the rest of the iris. At the top of the eye will be dark as well because that's hooded or shaded by the eyelid. Just shading in the nostrils and the mouth, just getting in the main shaded areas for the moment, trying to define the eyelashes a little bit above and below and the eyelids, and getting a little depth there. And then the area of the left of the face is more in shade, so even that line of the nostril will be darker. So I'm using it, go heavier on your pencil, like a HB if you're limited to your pencils, or you can use a heavier pencil for those bits, shading in the eyebrows, and starting off with the hair and then as well a bit. Trying to get in a little bit of, just looking at the details of the shade around the eyes, and even getting a little bit of shade into the eyeball there. So hopefully it's still interesting for you to see this time lapse, this demonstration of a longer drawing. And it's a much different approach to the sketches, of course, but it would be a similar approach to the long drawing of the woman. That is a much more highly contrasted drawing though. There's much more light and shade going on. This will be more subtle in skin tone. Skin tone, I generally use a 2H to lay down some of the skin tone. I'm blocking off some of the hair tones now, just going in a little bit with, I think it's an F. But again, your 2H would be fine, a combination of your 2H and your HB. So I'll give you a few little tips on the skin. In terms of how you hold your pencil. As you see, I'm holding it quite far down. the length, and that allows me to apply less pressure. If you need more detail, you hold it closer to the tip. So less pressure, it's not a detailed area. I'm looking for sort of to establish some sort of sweeping tones here and there. So this sort of flat look that will hopefully, I can change it from going from light to dark, but there is a certain sort of flat tonality that I want to achieve. So the slight side of your pencil is really important. So skin, side of your pencil, and holding your pencil to the middle or further down. And remember your blending, remember the blending that you did, the drawing of the circle with the sphere. I know I've said it before, but I'm just reminding you again of all these little exercises that are essential tools. And I said that was an essential tool for portraiture. It's really good sort of exercise to remember of how you build up skin tone. So you're changing from dark to light, and likewise we'll be using that skill for the skin tone here, because like the sphere, the face has volume, so we want to create that sense of volume from going from dark to light. But of course it's not a perfect spherical shape, so it's not going to be exactly the way you did your sphere. So I'm just going to give you a few more little tips on skin. So yes, generally use your 2H and build up, and I build up tentatively the tone from light to dark. I want some areas of my skin to pop, and I want to create a look of luminosity off the skin. There are, particularly the tip of the nose generally will be an area where there's light, so there'll be light reflected on the nose. So that is actually my white area. Keep that white. In between the eyes, there's an area just above the bridge of the nose which has light reflected on it. Under the eye, and there is a slight tone then to the area under the eye, so it's not pure white, very slight. So you're moving from your light to dark, so you're going really delicately around the cheeks, the sort of base of the cheeks which sit beside the mouth. They're quite light. You've got your cupid's bow, which is quite light, an area on your chin, your septum and your cupid's bow. So I think I've covered basically the light areas of the skin. So you're really trying to achieve subtlety of tone. Your 2H is light, and it's ideal. So I've moved into blocking off the hair again a bit, and then going back into blocking off some of the skin. Getting in, shading out some of the details around the eyebrows. So you can go lean heavier on the one pencil as I'm doing here, or you can use a variety of pencils. So I'm using a combination, well, for the hair, F, 2H, F, 2B at the moment. I will go in darker again later. So really, this is just to show you the process. So there I go, sort of shading in that top between the eyes, and you'll get that light reflected there. So slowly building up with the 2H. In the sketch, I used the more extreme side of my pencil, and I used a heavier, darker, softer pencil, like a 4B or even a 2B, a 6B, for that quick sketch where the pencil rolls across the page really quickly. I'm not looking for that here. I'm using a hard pencil. The H is for hard, the B is for blackness, and that indicates the softness of the pencil. So like for the eye, when I went into details of the eye, I really held the pencil quite close to its tip. Have your pencils really sharp for particularly for stuff like that, for your details. Yeah, and you're holding your pencil at the tip rather than at the side. You could do a little test or have a little test page beside you, and before you go to do the tones of your drawing, test out the difference between when you hold your pencil to the side, when you hold it farther down the length or closer to the length, and just the different angles and the different ways you can hold your pencil. Do a little tester so you feel like you've gotten a handle on a sort of a language, if you like, of shading. This drawing took me hours, so I'm building up this skin tone. Like, it's really subtle, but I'm building it up over a long time because I want to maintain that subtlety, but the realism where it changes ever so slightly to a slightly different tone to indicate that maybe a muscle in the forehead there, or that sunken sort of area under the cheekbone that reaches up to the eye, so to get that really delicate. Shading in areas now around the eyeball and the eyelid. As I said, the eyelash casts a shadow onto the eyeball. And just really hone into details. If you're drawing from something like a pad or from a phone, the benefit of that is that you can zoom right in. If you're drawing from paper, if you have a magnifying glass, if you're drawing from a printout or a photo that's printed, magnifying glass is really handy to use if you have it handy, or just try and look really closely at the details. Just shading in the lips now. Again, there's just so many subtleties about drawing a lip. Like, there's darker areas at the top of the lip, and generally the bottom lip tends to hold more light or reflect a lot more light. There's all these cracks on the bottom of the lip, and if you get your pencil again really sharp and just start off with a 2H and try to draw them in, and don't just presume what shape these cracks are. Don't, really look at the shape of the lips and the curve and the spacing between those sort of cracked bits of skin. They're not actually cracked, but they're those lines that can crack in your bottom lip. So though the skin on the right will be a lot lighter, the more you look, the more you see. So I'm seeing really subtle even changes of tone from really light to slightly darker, and I'm trying to get those in. Just need to fix that eyebrow. And then just shading around the nose tip again, really trying to make that white pop. So that's where I'm starting my tones from, the white of wherever it is, whatever bit of white, whether it's in the eye, and you want to, if that white tone pops, then you want to create that, you want to recreate that. So you will be able to do that by building up tone around the area that needs to pop. For the most part on my iPad, I looked at this image in its colour, so it was a coloured photo. But eventually then I really wanted to be sure of my tonalities, that the tones I'm getting in were right. So I edited the photo into being a black and white image, and that actually really helped as well. I'm just trying to get in some of those darker areas. I am starting with a 2B and I will later get darker with the pencil, but it's quite dark on top, this particular hair. Now always with hair, obviously there's a reflective sort of glossy area around, if you like, the crown of the head, or like a halo that sits on top of the head. And eventually I'll bring that in, and what will help me is the use of a putty rubber. And if you don't have a putty rubber, that's fine, because I didn't have a putty rubber for my other long drawing. Use an eraser and break it down, even cut little bits off so you can get like fine edges with the eraser to give you highlighted areas. Now I'm putting in loads of detail on the hair and loads of different tones. So on the hair, it's much more, because there's so many different locks going in different directions, there will be more jumps from dark to light than there are on the skin. There's layers of locks sitting on top of each other. But there are, even within, let's say, a particular lock or strand, and I give you the example in the PDF of this very thick lock that sits on the fringe to the right, how it changes from dark, slowly blends from dark at its root to light, and it will get quite light and then darker again, but not really dark. So if you like dark tone coming into mid-tone to light tone and back to mid-tone in it, if it's going down its length. If that's unclear, just refer to the PDF and that should be more clear. So I was just shading it in there. So yeah, particularly loads of detail in this hair, and I love drawing hair because I love the organic flow of hair. It's very sort of expressive. I'm trying to get in lots of much darker areas, so in places I will be using a 4B. You sort of get a bit of a headache from trying to get so much detail into places like the hair, and it really challenges your observation skills and your patience, because obviously drawing, a lot about drawing is about patience, and particularly a drawing of this length. And for you, if you're going to do your long drawing, do it to your abilities. So let's say you've only ever done a drawing that takes you 2 hours, do a 3-hour drawing. If you've done a drawing that has taken you 6 hours, you could try just to do another 6-hour drawing, or you could push yourself a little bit more. And the reason to push yourself a little bit more is you will get more information down, and that can be subtle information. It doesn't mean that it has to be really dark and black. So because the more you spend looking, the more you will see. So that will reflect, that amount of time that you spend on something will hopefully reflect in a drawing. Of course, you need to know when to stop as well. So sort of just use your judgment on that. So again, I've gone back to the skin. It's really important to take time to look away from something. So I went to the hair, and I'll go back to the hair. But it's really nice then to go back to the skin. You'll see it in a different way. And then once you've established a different tonal area, such as the hair, it'll make you look at the skin differently and reassess the tone of that area as well. So you're constantly back and forth and tweaking. With the eyebrow, there was something not right with the eye, which I realised it's definitely the right eye is definitely a little bit too high, and could perhaps be a smidgen closer to the other eye. I sort of didn't change this, but I sort of compensated for it. I tried to fix it as best I could. I really looked at the eyebrow where I could make it look a bit more like the photo. So just reassess the angle of the eyebrow, and getting in the right shade around the eye, I found really helped the eyelid. And there's a range of tones in the eyebrows as well, like there would be in hair. See, hair is going in different ways. Sometimes you can see them, sometimes it's worth trying to put them in. But even if you could just do blending of tone, flat, not completely flat because there'll be different tones, but rather than doing the detail of the hair, do the detail of the hair if you can, but even if you get the shading on the eyebrow, great. Eventually, when it comes to the actual head of hair, I'm going to put in even little strands of hair by the fringe, just to get in that extra bit of realism in the stage where I'm at the final touches. So for you watching it, you might not see that many changes. Apologies for the lighting here, because I'm just doing it at different times of day, and sometimes the phone isn't quite focused. It does get a little better now. Yeah, so it's a little bit better now. What was I saying? Yeah, just in the final bits, getting in some more detail, like the hair and that. So yeah, you might not see that many changes as you go along because the changes are so subtle. But I do want to show you, just in a really, really sped up version, how you might approach a longer drawing. So yeah, I'm getting in the more detail on the bottom lip there. There was just to make that light on the bottom lip pop out. I'm going into more shading under the chin. And for some of that shading, I'll just use a 2B and now and then change it up to a 4B, but really try to be quite subtle, you know, and all that shading, and just tentative about what sort of darkness I put in. Going back into the skin again. I'm going to go back to the hair shortly. I guess I'm really trying to strive to capture that the luminosity of the skin. Just looks, obviously he's a little boy, so it looks really plump and shiny, and those little bits of shading really help to make the lighter areas of skin pop. So going back into the hair now and going in again with a darker pencil, because I've had time away from the hair. I've been concentrating again on the skin. It sort of helps me to reassess the hair and the tones in the hair. So then I realised it definitely needed to be darker. So going back in with my 2B and my 4B as well, and getting in more detail, more blended areas. And I will use a putty rubber again soon to help with the highlights on the hair. So it's all about detail, and therefore for a lot of the time some of the time, like now, I'm holding my pencil to the side where I'm just getting in areas of tone, but when I'm getting in the lines and smaller areas of detail, I'm holding my pencil closer to its tip, even if I still am holding it on its side. So it's interesting for you to even see that. I think for me, like, it's very intuitive the way I hold the pencil. It's become intuitive based on practice, and you don't even know that you're doing it till you have to teach, and you have to reassess, well, what am I doing and how can I teach what I'm doing. So you start to analyze what you're doing. And so for you, if that's something you feel like you need to work on, I think looking at what I'm doing, practicing it a little bit, as I said, on your your bit of side paper. And then slowly, as you try and consciously bring it in to your drawing, it will become second nature and it will become intuitive. So keep your pencils sharp for the hair. Going in there, you see, with the putty rubber, but I went a little bit too far. It's easy to go a bit far. With the putty rubber, to lift, you can dab or slightly pull it lightly. Pulling it, I find a little bit better because you tend to get more even tonal areas, where when you're dabbing it can become a bit patchy. So I took off a bit too much there, so went back into it just to subtly blend it from mid-tone to light again. So I'm trying to tone in the areas to the right of the ear there where I was, and they're quite dark around the ear because there's a lot of area for shade. And now there is, you haven't seen it before, but there's quite a bit of hair curls to the left of the ear as well. Okay, so finally drawing in the right ear. I leave ears to last because they don't interest me that much, but it is good to try and get a sense of realism. So I am really trying to observe the ear in terms of all the different shapes and then the subtle tones on the ear. And just always stand back from something, look at it again, go back in, give it another go, look at it again. So that's made me sort of building up that right area with the hair and the ear, just made me reassess the tone of the skin on the right cheek, because there's quite a bit of shade just right in on the right. Even though now this drawing is finished, I probably could easily go back into it and do more, but you have to stop at some time, so yeah, to resist and move on. So the other thing that I noticed that's wrong with the drawing, I kept kind of, something not right, kept looking at it and comparing it quite closely to the photo. And I realised the neck was too wide, and it wasn't wide enough, so I've broadened the neck on the right hand side, because it was like a lollipop. The neck was like a lollipop stick. It was tiny, and didn't even make sense that I could balance on that size of a neck. So it's a good centimetre wider, and it's made all the difference to the look. So I would encourage you to change even at this stage. And I don't take all of my own advice, because as I said, I could have changed the right eye, but I being finicky. If I was to do it all again, I would do it differently for sure. Another tip, that I need to take my own advice on as well. Okay, a lot of us, as we see in our art class, we draw on the table, flat on the table, and I've done that with all the drawings. But really, the better way, you get a better view if it's on a wall, if it's on an easel, but then you need all the implements, so it's a lot of equipment. Like, I don't have the right case for my pad to sit on an easel, and so it would be right next to the easel would be the ideal thing. the reason that's easier is because obviously you're bending your body over, and you still, when you're drawing on a table, you still can't get a perfect view. It's really hard to. The other thing is if you can't, if you don't have access to a table, easel or anything like that, if you can't prop up your drawing and your whatever you're drawing from, so that needs to be at the same angle, whatever you're drawing from and what you're drawing on. So your paper or your photo or your pad, they need to be at the same angle. It'll just be impossible to draw otherwise, and get the right angles. You'd be making your life really hard. So if you can't do that, if you can stand sometimes when you're drawing, that'll be of great benefit. So let's say you are drawing on the table, stand up sometimes, you'll get more of an overview and just a way to reassess your drawing. So I'm moving on to the fabric here. The jumper that the boy is wearing is a yellow acrylic wool jumper. And I think it's important to know what fabric, if you can, or just get a real sense of the fabric. You're not going to always know what fabric you're drawing, but this will help you, to differentiate. Once you, let's say you're doing loads of these drawings and you're drawing a woolen jumper, you might be able to differentiate the quality from an acrylic wool jumper or whatever. So certainly because it's yellow, it's going to be light in tone, and there's a ribbing around the collar, and that ribbing needs to be at the right angles and perspective. And as the ribbing approaches the center of the neck, the ribs splay out more. They splay out towards the bottom, so they're wider at the bottom of the collar than they are at the top. They're more gathered at the top. Because it is wool and not cotton, it's even more sort of bubbly. So those ribbed lines are kind of very rounded. They're sort of fluffy. So you have to consider all of that. And there's no prescription or trick or way to do anything really. I'm giving you as many tips as I can, but it all comes down to observation. So I'd never drawn this woolen jumper before, but through pure observation, I managed to do it. And before I did it, I was a bit worried that I wouldn't be able to make it look realistic, but I did, and I did through observation. And I start off with quite a light pencil, so you can use your 2H. I could have maybe had a 4H, but regardless. And it's quite a blunt end because it's a very thick mechanical pencil. You could use a sharper end, or you could blunt your pencil. Let's see. So that's the end of the recording. And in your PDFs, I've shown you a close-up of the neck of the jumper. So hopefully that will be helpful as well for you to have a little analysis. It looks like, it really looks like it's knit. Okay, so speak to you next week for lesson 5. Thank you.